Hello there, this is Mr. Tierney, and we are going to pick up with part 2 of our plant notes entitled Plant Structure and Function. So let's get started. Our objectives for the second part here is we're going to take a look more at the structure and function of specific parts of the plant, roots, stems, and leaves. And this might be a little fun fact for you. Everybody knows that tomatoes really aren't vegetables. They're classified as fruits. But really, it extends further than that. If you eat a root of any kind, or a stem, or a leaf, you are eating a vegetable of the plant. But if you're eating something that holds seeds, then you are eating a fruit. So not just tomatoes, but other things that you might call a vegetable, like green peppers, or green beans, or peas. These are all considered fruits. So the next time you go to Subway and you tell your sandwich artist what you want on your sandwich, and they say, would you like veggies on that? You can correct them and say, well, actually, some of these are vegetables and some of them are fruits, and I just want to make you aware, which I'm sure you all will do. Explain how meristems differ from other plant tissues, and we'll talk about what meristems are, and then describe the structure of leaves coupled with photosynthesis. So let's talk about roots first. I think we all know from probably elementary school what roots do. They absorb nutrients and water. They also act as an anchor to the plant. Some also store food. In fact, most do. And the big thing here that you might not know is why there are root hairs upon a root hair. In other words, if you take a look here, here's this central root right here, but then it's got all these little bitty hairs that are growing off to the side everywhere. It looks really fuzzy. And it says here it's for extra water absorption, but the bigger idea here is that the root hairs grow because we want to increase surface area. Surface area is the key thing. So if you think in your math class how you calculate surface area, that's probably just going to be like a length times a width. And the more surface area that is on this plant, the more area there is for water to enter and nutrients to enter. So if the root was just the center part right here, yeah, it could absorb some water and some nutrients, but by having all these little extensions, it means that each one of these little bitty teeny tiny branches increases the surface area for water to be taken in. Root types. There are two different root types, and we talked about this briefly in part 1 when we looked at the different groups of angiosperms, monocots versus dicots. A taproot is a very big root that is very central, so or a single root that's relatively deep in the ground. So some examples would be carrots, turnips. Again, these are associated with dicots. And then the other kind here that are very almost like hairy, and they are shorter, and they have lots of different extensions. These are called fibrous roots, which kind of is in the name there. They're fibrous. And most of our all of our monocots have these as their root system. Grasses and all of our cereal grains like corn and wheat, barley, oats, these all have these fibrous roots. And again, these are associated with monocots. Stems. Stems are solely, besides the support, are used for transportation of food and water. And so it's used as a transport system. And we call these right here, we call these vascular tissue or vascular bundles. And so what you see here is actually a cross-section. So if you think of this picture right here that I'm pointing at, and you take this circle, what it really is this guy right down here. If we chopped off the stem, this is what you'd see. And so you see all these holes in here, but realize these are 3D holes, and so they go down the plant. And what happens is these are actually dead cells. It's called ground tissue, but they're just dead cells. But there's not a whole lot of organelles in these cells. Basically, they're just a bunch of cell walls that have fused together, and they act as these really big straws. These straws that allow water to actually be sucked out of the ground. Because of evaporation through the leaves, it draws the water up through the stem right here. So if you think of it kind of like a suction, that's exactly how it works. Here is your leaf, and out of your leaf you have these little teeny tiny pores called stomata, which we'll talk about. Some people call them stomata. And what happens is water will evaporate out. Let me get my pen up here. So you have water that evaporates out of these leaves, and as the water evaporates or leaves the plant this way, it allows new water to come in through the root system and pulls it up the stem and then through the leaf, again, where it's either used in photosynthesis or excess water and CO2 escape through those little pores in the leaf. So stems are used primarily as support and as a transport system. Supports the leaves and enables them to do better photosynthesis, again, through intake of water, when water is a substance that is definitely needed to carry out the process of photosynthesis. Right, so I just talked to you real quick about xylem and phloem. There are two kinds of these straws, I guess if you want to call them straws, that kind of exist in the stems and in the petioles of the leaf. And again, this is a cross section. I know this is kind of a weird looking picture, but picture if you were to just cut off the top of a straw and look down into it, and what you would see are these little circles right here. If you just cut off a straw, and all of these are able to carry different amounts and different types of nutrients through the plant. In general, we say that xylem carries water from the roots to the leaves, or another way we could say this is that the xylem carries things up, if you want to put that down, okay? Xylem carries things up, and then at the same time, leaves, as they carry out photosynthesis, they are making food. Remember, plants are autotrophs, and leaves are the centers for photosynthesis, and they continue to make food. Well, they need to spread that food out, and it just can't stay in the leaves. Again, it's the food in the form of starch, carbohydrates, and so what happens is the phloem that you see right here carries sugars or starches from the leaves to the rest of the plant. And this is located on the outside of the stem. Now, why is that important? It's important because these are really sugars. And so if you've ever heard of them tapping maple syrup out of a tree, if you've ever seen it done maybe, this is what they're doing. They are tapping just below the bark cambium to the phloem tubes, and these phloem tubes have a really thick sugary sap, and that's what comes out of your maple tree. And then they boil it down so it turns to this caramel color, and then they sell it to you at a very expensive price. So this is xylem. Xylem goes up, phloem goes down. Another way I remember this is that phloem carries food. They both have that F sound, even though this is PH. They both have that F sound. Phloem food. Phloem food. A little bit about leaves. Again, like I said earlier, these are the photosynthetic portions of the plant. And so here's just a little bit of anatomy. You can see here that right now, or actually we're a little bit past now, but most of the trees have leaves that are not all the way grown yet. In other words, they are really close, but what you will see first are just these little bitty buds, and I'm guessing you've seen them, that form first during springtime, and then out of this there's almost a germination of this stem and this leaf that comes out. And so this leaf, if you notice, the leaf is a simple leaf, has a blade. This middle vein right there is called the midrib. The petiole is the leaf stem, and then of course this is the plant stem. Now, we said that plants are vascular, and just to again grasp what that means, you have a vascular system also. It's called your cardiovascular system, where there is one central chamber, your heart, that pumps blood and other nutrients to all the extremities of your body, including your fingers and toes and your brain. And it's all connected by these little teeny tiny veins. Well, that's the exact same way a plant works too, at least vascular plants. They have a a vascular system that carries water and nutrients. And so what you see here is, again, the tubes would be in here. If you remember from a couple slides ago, these stem tubes would be located all throughout here, and then they branch off, and then they'd get smaller, and they'd go out through the leaf right here into all these branching veins, so that food could be passed down all the way through the plant, and water, the opposite, through its xylem, would go all the way up and get to the the furthest extensions of the leaf to carry out photosynthesis. A little more on leaf parts. The overall flat part of the leaf right here, this is called the blade. These, again, are two simple leaves, and I'll go into a little bit further detail about that in a couple slides. The leaf stem is called the petiole, and the combination, actually, of the petiole and the blade collectively, and that's what you see down here, is called the leaf. Veins, again, they carry water, minerals, sugars to the rest of the plant. There are certain leaf types, like I said. The ones that you've seen so far are just called simple leaves, where there's just one blade per petiole. A compound leaf, on the other hand, these can have a wide variety of forms, and sometimes they're not even just compound, but they're twice compound or even 3 times compound. And that means that they have leaflets on them. So I'm going to look at this thing right here. The first kind of compound leaf is this top image where there's this central petiole here, but then you see all these leaflets marking all the way down, and pinnate actually means feather, and so you see that right here, like feathers. It kind of looks like a feather with the hairs coming out on both sides of the center. And these pinnate compound leaves, this whole thing that you see right here is one leaf. It's just one leaf with a bunch of leaflets. The same thing is true with our second type of compound leaf. This is called palmate, the one right here. This is called a palmate compound. If you think of your hand, if you were to point your hand towards your face, you would see your palm in the middle, and then your fingers would radiate out from your palm, and so that's again why we call it palmate. Kind of looks like your hand. And each one has smaller branches radiating off from the center point here, just a very central point. Again, this is one leaf with 5 leaflets. Now let's talk about a little, probably a new word to you, and the word is meristems. And meristems are places where there is rapid cell division, or mitosis. And so when you see new growth on a plant, like you can go out right now to your tree, and you'll see all your branches on your tree, but then there will be this little bitty extension on the branch. So let me draw this for you real quick. So here's a basic plant here, and I'm not going to do a very good job, but let's say this is your plant from last year. What you should see, if you go out to your yard and you look at your trees, you should see just a little bit of new branch right here at the ends of your branches, where the branch just got a little bit longer and the whole tree just got a little bit fuller, a little bit bigger. So what that is, not only with the branches, but also that you see with the leaves here, okay, and especially at the top right here, these are centers for growth. Apical meristem versus axillary meristem. Again, the apical versus axillary, that just refers to their location. Apical means at the top, axillary means growing off the side of the stem. But the real word here, meristem, means there's all this mitosis going on where there are leaves that are growing, and there are a lot of cells that are going through mitosis right here at the top so that the plant can continue to grow up and up and up. So at the tips of the roots, the tops of the stems, and at the branches. Something I didn't mention, again, down here is another apical meristem. You also will find these at the roots, so that mitosis is taking place in a lot of different locations throughout the plant. This is just a close-up on meristematic tissue. Produces new cells by what process? And I just said it on the last slide, but hopefully if you remember from way back when, hopefully some of this stuff sticks, you have this going on, if this rings a bell, okay? Prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase. So by what process? There's a lot of cell division taking place here through the process of mitosis. Okay, mitosis is cell division that is primarily for healing and for growth. And so that's what you see here. This is an apical meristem at the top of the plant, and the plant is going to continue to get taller and taller and taller. So on this slide, I have a question for you. I want to know, if you have this tree trunk right here, okay, and you go on a date with your significant other, and then you're like, you know what, baby, I want to carve our names in the tree trunk. And so you make this little heart in the tree, okay, and you put your initials right in the middle, which is too small for me to put in there, but you put your initials right there in the middle of the heart. And then you leave, okay? You leave, and so you made this carving in the tree, and then you came back. So this is now then I want to know what would happen, what would it look like in 10 years? Let's say you came back on your 10-year anniversary. What would this heart look like? What would the heart look like? Would it be, well, actually, I'll just let you talk. I'll let you think about it for a second. What would that heart look like? Would it have grown taller? Would it have stayed in the same spot? Would it have kind of branched out? So take a minute. Now, after you thought about this for just a second, how meristems work is they continue to build on top of the existing tree, almost like you would build a skyscraper. You start at the foundation, and then you build another layer on top of that, and then another layer on top of that, and another layer on top of that. So what would happen is this tree would continue to grow taller, and it would get some branches and some leaves, but this heart right here would stay in the same spot. So if you said the same spot, great job. A little bit more anatomy here. Again, this is a cross section of a stem, and you're only seeing a small piece of this. So again, let me kind of draw here for you. What you're seeing here is, let's say this is the stump. You're just seeing the stump on the top there, and really there's rings inside this thing. You are basically just looking at a very small sliver. You're looking at like this much of it, okay? So what you see here down the middle is you see two different what we call cambiums or layers. One right here and another one right on the outside here. Now, this cambium, the first one here, the vascular cambium we call it, if I can write, okay? This vascular cambium, this is going to produce new phloem that goes this way. I'm going to put a little P there for phloem, excuse me, and then let me change my color here. Then this way, this is going to produce xylem on the inside. So xylem's on the inside, phloem's on the outside, and again, each year you're going to get a new layer, right, or a new ring of growth, and this grows out in all directions. So when you see those new rings on a tree, basically what you're seeing are the outside layers are the newest layers of xylem that are being made. So water is being transferred in the interior here, and food is being transferred out here. Another thing to note here is, remember, this is where food is being stored, so this is like sugary in here. So if you tap into the bark cambium right here and you drill into it from the side, you are going to tap into that sap, or that kind of sticky, sugary substance like maple sugar, and it's going to tap into this phloem right here on the outside. So the second kind right here, the second cambium here, this is called a cork cambium, and that's what you see this line right here again. Okay, so there's two cambiums right there, and they're growth centers too. A little bit more on leaves and photosynthesis. Leaves actually will give off CO2, and they will give off water, and they'll do that by releasing it through these things called stoma, or sometimes we say stomata. Okay? We even sometimes call these plants stomates because they, in fact, have these little pores that you see right here. These pores are just openings, and the openings, what they do is they will release water that's not used, and that's why in the summertime, if you drive past a cornfield and it's really, really hot, what you'll see is the leaves, they won't be flat. They'll be all rolled up, and they'll be rolled up because the water is being lost at a really fast rate, that they'll close those up and kind of shrink the outer layer of the leaf, and so it will start to curl. A little bit of breakdown here. This cuticle right here, this cuticle is made of wax, okay? And if you know anything about wax, wax is kind of like, it's a fatty substance. It's kind of like oil, and waxes and water do not mix. And so this cuticle that you see across the top here, it has this waxy layer on it, and that is to prevent evaporation of water. It's to hold the water in on both sides here. It holds water in, so that really the only place that water can escape is through these stomata, or the stoma there. Okay, so that's the cuticle, prevents water evaporation. Then you have these cells in the middle here, or I guess just below the cuticle, and these are kind of column-like cells. Let me switch these cells right here. These are called palisade cells. And palisade cells are really cool at directing light. I almost would kind of characterize them as kind of like a fiber optic cable. And so what happens is light will come through, it will go past this cuticle layer, which is clear, really, and then it will hit one of these cells and it'll bounce all the way through. And then it will come off at a certain spot. And then maybe another light photon will come through here and bounce off this way. And another one will bounce off this way. They're kind of, it's almost like a ping pong ball going through here. And what happens is these palisade cells will direct light to not just the top mesophyll cells here, but where photosynthesis is taking place. But it will try to make sure that light is not only getting to these top cells, but it shoots down to these bottom cells also. So palisade mesophyll, these cells up here are for absorbing and channeling, if you will, light, so that all of these mesophyll cells right here can get adequate sunlight to carry out photosynthesis. Spongy mesophyll, that's what you see right here. This is the majority of the leaf, I would say. It's the big bracket right here. Spongy mesophyll is just where most of the photosynthesis is taking place. There's a lot of gas exchange here. In other words, a lot of CO2 for O2 gas exchange. And again, O2 will leave through the stoma as well. And a lot of CO2 will even leave through the stoma. Out of all the CO2 that's taken in by the plant, only about 5 to 7% of the CO2 actually gets used. And CO2 is then converted directly into sugar, and it becomes cellulose, and it becomes the wood of the plant, and it becomes the leaves, and all of those structures that make a plant rigid, or especially trees that make it rigid, like lumber. Lumber is 98% cellulose sugar, and it's all converted CO2. It's all that converted carbon. And the last thing here, the stoma, again, is surrounded by these guard cells. And the guard cells kind of look like this. Okay? I'm going to kind of, it's almost like two kidney bean looking things like that. Okay? These are guard cells, and there's this hole in the middle. And this hole in the middle is where the water and the gas can escape. But if the plant is really trying to conserve water, these guard cells will kind of shrink, or they'll kind of puff up, and so they will actually close. So if it's really hot, if it's hot outside and they want to conserve water, what they'll do is they will close these guard cells, and so it will look like this. And that's a bad drawing. Let me try one more time. And so what you'll see here is what I'm trying to do, and I'm failing at it, is to try and close this gap. They'll kind of squeeze together so that there is no hole, or there is no opening anymore. I know it's kind of a lengthy slide, but a lot of good descriptions here of just how a plant works and with photosynthesis. By the way, you could take a year-long class just on photosynthesis. It is extremely complex, and there are many, many steps that go into photosynthesis. And the last thing I'll say here, if you want to view these, this is just showing you a radish growing and then a green bean germination. And it kind of just shows you a slow motion view of what a seed germinating into a mature plant looks like. So if you'd like to take a look at these, you're more than welcome to. You might have to jot them down or just type them into your device or your computer, and you can take a look at these two videos. Neither one of these will have information that we will test you on. It's just so that you can kind of get a sense of the big picture of how a seed germinates and then turns into a mature plant. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you do well throughout this chapter. And this is Mr. Tierney signing off.